All right, folks, it is time for the news of the day and all along those lines. So let me give you a report on what's going on, and we'll see if our regular panelists show up and all along those lines. But a number of things are happening in the world. Putin says Russia and North Korea will help each other if attacked, taking ties to a new level. So Kim Jong Un and Putin have signed a mutual defense pact in North Korea. And they're definitely saying that they will protect each other under a new partnership. So definitely, it looks like Putin is even thanking Kim Jong Un for supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine as the nation signed a mutual defensive pact. And Tropical Storm Alberta is expected in the Gulf today. So, the Atlantic season's first tropical storm, Alberta, is expected to form over the Gulf of Mexico. And it looks like tropical storm warning issued in Texas ahead of a heavy rain. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but we could definitely use that heavy rain here in North Carolina, as there is a definite heat wave here. As a matter of fact, the heat wave is to scorch eastern U.S. with record high temperatures. And definitely, it looks like that is going on. And as Juneteenth grows in the U.S., definitely today is the celebration of June states. Of Juneteenth. There are definitely southern states that are clinging to the Confederate holidays. So that is something else that we're seeing on the news as well. So, like I said, a lot of things are happening in the world affairs, and I'll get to some other items as well, and we'll see who shows up in terms of our usual panel and all along those lines. But there are a number of things taking place in the world, and we're always glad to report them here on Pod TV and let you know what's going on in that sense. So definitely, that is something that a lot of people are paying attention to. As a matter of fact, at least 9 were killed after the country of Chad ammunition depot fire triggered explosion. So Chad president has ordered a probe after the army depot blast in capital kills 9, and a fire at the Chad military ammunition depot triggered the blast. So that's something else that is going on in the news. And 2 were arrested for spraying an orange substance on Stonehenge in the UK. So that's something else that we're seeing in the news as Just Stop Oil protesters spray Stonehenge with paint. So that is something else going on as climate activists vandalize Stonehenge by spraying orange powder. So that is something else that is being seen in the news and all along those lines. And Israel's plan for a tactical pause for aid raises questions and deepens the rifts. So definitely that is something else that we're seeing in the news as well. So Israel is to stop fighting at the Gaza border crossing for 11 hours per day. So this is something else that is going on in the world as well. And more than a million were threatened in a Sudan city under siege by paramilitary forces. So a massacre threatens Darfur once again. So definitely that is something that we're seeing in the news as definitely a lot of people are reporting on that as well. And a ship attacked by Yemen's Houthi rebels in a fatal assault sinks in the Red Sea. So that is something else that people are talking about in the news. And the shipping industry is urging Red Sea action as Houthis sink their second vessel. So the Houthi attack sinks the second Red Sea ship, and that is something else that people are paying attention to in the news as the world. And Ada Sagi says, I don't believe in peace now. He is a Hamas hostage survivor, and he's 75, and that's what he tells the BBC. So the freed Israeli hostage recounts ordeal in Gaza, where she says she was held in a hospital and civilian homes. So, as a matter of fact, she was a former hostage and peace activist, and she said that she doesn't believe in peace anymore. And extreme heat is killing hundreds of Muslim pilgrims. Hundreds died during this year's Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia amid intense heat. That's what officials are saying. More than 300 Egyptians have died from the heat during the Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia, according to diplomats. So that is something that folks are paying attention to as well. In South China Sea, the Filipino soldiers fought off the Chinese with bare hands. So definitely it looks like the Philippines are blaming Chinese for personnel injuries and vessel damage in the South China Sea collision. So it looks like China deploys an amphibious warship near the Philippines, and definitely that is something that's going on as well. And like pirates is what Philippines says of the armed Chinese forces that hurt the sailors. So definitely that is something else that we're seeing in the news. And Israel warns Lebanon of the prospect of an all-out war as U.S. seeks to de-escalate the hostilities. And Hezbollah says that Israel's strike killed 3 of the fighters in Lebanon. Following Netanyahu's criticism, U.S. canceled a strategic meeting with Israel on Iran. So definitely a lot of things are going on in that Middle East area as well. A U.S. aircraft carrier and its crew have fought Houthi attacks for months, and definitely that is something else that is going on. A U.S. Navy warship was struck in the Red Sea battle, and they're saying they can't fight the Houthis forever. So U.S. warship Houthis claim to have sunk host a Taco Tuesdays. So definitely that's something else that's going on as well, as U.S. and U.K. forces launch strike on Yemen's Houdidah and Cameron Islands. That's what the Houthi-run TV is saying. And the French far-right leader, Bardella, is back in Ukraine, but would not send long-range missiles. So the French far-right leader, Bardella, no troops or long-range missiles to Ukraine. So definitely the French leftist alliance is edging closer to Le Pen in the election polls. And definitely that is something else that is going on as well. And it looks like a college exam scandal could be an issue in India. So definitely a lot of people are paying attention to that as well. And like I said in another news story or another podcast, Kenya's tax bill is drawing protests from protesters. So Kenya risks a deficit target after bowing to anti-tax protests. So that is something else that we are seeing in the news as well. And apparently the EU has a chicken feet problem with China. So China is targeting Europe's soft pork belly, and it looks like that facing the EV tariffs, China is threatening pork imports from Europe. So that is something else that we are seeing as well. So that's some of the news that is international. We'll get to some of the national news also and see what folks have got to say about a number of these things. I'm going to bring in my good friend, Rick Rosner, who's with me as well. And he might have some news stories and things that he wants to add as well, because like I said, I'm at work, so we'll check out what he's got going on in his world as I bring up some of the...
I'm barely awake. I was
also, so how are things going in your neck of the woods? Like I said, we've got summer camp over here, so I had to come in for pictures and everything, but I was just wondering, how is your day going? Because I do see that the U.S. Navy is monitoring Russian warships in sight of Miami. So apparently U.S. destroyers are following a sub as it traveled to the Atlantic, and the Russian nuclear-powered submarine was leaving Cuba. So I do know that they were doing some exercising in Cuba between the Russians and the Cuban folks and everything in like that. And apparently an ex-Thailand Prime Minister Shinawatra has been indicted for defaming the monarchy. So I guess you can get in trouble for defaming the monarchy, and North Korean troops are crossing the border, and South Korea has apparently fired warning shots. So apparently we got all kinds of conflicts all over the world and all in that space. But how are things going with you down there in California?
I'm fine. I'm barely awake. It's only 7 a.m. here. But I did read a newspaper article saying that the garbage war with North Korea, where they float stuff on balloons over each other's borders, South Korea is now floating balloons over North Korea, playing K-pop songs and broadcasting news about how life in South Korea is less sucky than life in North Korea. Because they call North Korea the hermit kingdom because its people, don't have a lot of access to information about how, the rest of the world is less sucky than North Korea.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely can be less sucky. I don't know about you, but I don't know how you would survive and I haven't had to use them, but if your 9/11 system went down, but apparently in Massachusetts and it's back up and everything, but their emergency 911 system temporarily went down statewide. So it wasn't just in like one part of Massachusetts, like Boston.
LA doesn't have enough cops. So like if you called 911, in LA, like, saying, your house is being broke into, you might not get cops for a couple hours. Right. I mean, we're luckily, that hasn't happened to us, but we just keep a bunch of stuff by the door to hit people with. We've got these, we call them zombie bars. You put them under your doorknob, so when people try to kick your door in, it provides additional bracing. So we got a couple of those, and if people break in, maybe we'll get around to calling 911, but we'll mostly be like trying to fend them off with our bars.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are the fires still going on in California? Because I know that there was another story that said that villagers are scared to death by New Mexico wildfire. So that was in
I don't know.
New
Carol,
Mexico.
do we have any fires going on right now? We don't know. We're like, it's still only 7 a.m. and we're not fully briefed on what's going on.
Now I understand, but it says New Mexico wildfires have claimed
Yeah.
1,400 structures. So apparently they're having an issue with fires in New Mexico and all along those lines. So, we got a tight race up in above us in Virginia. So it looked like a tight Virginia GOP contest between Bob Good and John McGuire. And they're saying that that's too close to call. And they're saying that even Trump and McCarthy wanted revenge, but it didn't quite go as planned. So it looks like they are facing off in Virginia's 5th district election. So some of these things are not going as expected, including these talks, because apparently the U.S. canceled talks in Washington over Netanyahu's complaint of weapons holdup. So he's wanting some weapons, and apparently he's feeling that we were holding it up, and now there's not going to be a meeting, because I guess they were going to have a meeting of minds and all along those lines. And we got another U.S. Person that's in jail because apparently a U.S. soldier, Gordon Black, has been sentenced to nearly 4 years in the Russian penal colony. So he just got sentenced and everything. So we know we had Brittany Griner, but apparently he has been sentenced to 4 years according to state media reports. So definitely it'll be interesting what goes on in that space and whether we try to get him out.
It almost goes without saying that Americans should not visit Russia. It's too easy for them to lock you up on some BS charge. It used to be like St. Petersburg is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and you can walk into St. Petersburg from Finland, or at least you used to. They've got casinos and art museums, but like, don't do it. Don't give Russia a chance to lock you up for likely garbage charges.
Yeah, well, speaking of garbage charges, I know that we oftentimes talk about the divide on this show and everything and how we're a divided nation. But apparently, a Vermont Republican got in trouble, and they have apologized because they poured water into their colleague's bag. So apparently, the Vermont Republicans secretly poured water into their colleague's bag over months. So I guess they didn't just do it one time, but they apologized after getting caught on spy cam repeatedly pouring water in their fellow legislators' tote bag. So I don't know what you're supposed to be accomplishing by pouring water in a tote bag and everything, but apparently you also know that there are cameras everywhere, including spy cams and everything. So I guess they figured they weren't going to get caught while they were pouring water into the tote bag, and I don't know the purpose of pouring water into the tote bag, but this is just like one of those unusual divided nation kind of stories. So have you ever been mad at somebody enough that you went and poured water into their briefcase, their tote bag, or something else along those lines?
No, I had a coworker who would wrestle you. He'd walk for fun. He would unplug your computer as he walked by, and if you tried to stop him, he wrestled in college. And one time, I tried to stop him, and I ended up very quickly on the ground. And he poured Sprite in my ear, and this arm was numb and tingly for like 3 weeks after that. I don't think it was the Sprite. I think it was the wrestling. So
Yeah,
no water in the bag, but Sprite in my ear.
Gotcha. Well, apparently the Republicans blocked a bill to outlaw bump stock for rifles, and definitely looks like there are some folks that are saying that this could open the door to more lethal weapons. And I know we've been having an issue even here in Durham, North Carolina, with gun violence and everything. But apparently the Republican senators blocked the ban on the bump stock for guns that was brought by the Democrats. So definitely looks like that is going on and everything. So what is your thoughts about what's going on with gun violence? Because it's not just here, it's in California, it's everywhere. So what can we do about this gun violence? Because every time I turn around, it seems like folks are definitely getting caught more and more in this.
So we got 450 million guns roughly in America for about 250 million adult Americans. So I don't know that you can do gun control. I think what you have to do is make people bulletproof. I think there's a show on a comedy by the guys who did The Office called Upload, and it's set in the near future where once you're dead, they map your brain and then they replicate your consciousness in the metaverse. And really, I think that's the only solution is that in the next, I don't know, 12, 15 years, we'll figure out how to replicate people's brains. And so that's what you need to do. That like if you every day you like or every week you download your brain into a box, and if you get shot, they just start you over in the metaverse based on the last recording of your brain. So short of that, I don't know, is if maybe there's a genetic tweak to turn your skin into Kevlar. Other than
that could be an interesting idea. Speaking of genetic tweaks, our favorite person is in the news because apparently he called a city that I spent 4.5 years in, Milwaukee, horrible, and now he is saying that he plans to visit Chicago during the RNC, and he denies that he won't be staying in Milwaukee. So I guess some folks are saying that he won't be staying in Milwaukee, he'll be staying in Chicago, but he's saying that I guess he will be staying in Milwaukee since that's where the convention will be taking place, and definitely. Milwaukee mayor reacts to Trump stating to love the city after calling it horrible. So apparently he was trying to back off.
Trump called it horrible. I did some research. Milwaukee, according to Condé Nast Traveler magazine, is the third nicest big city in America. So it's probably not horrible. It seems like Laverne and Shirley were from there. It probably is a pretty nice town.
Not just Laverne and Shirley. Unless we want to go back to pop culture, let's not forget that Happy Days was set in Milwaukee as well, because that was Laverne and Shirley was actually a sequel of Happy Days. So yeah, they were set in Milwaukee as well. So both of those were Milwaukee-based shows, and there might have been some other ones that I'm not thinking about, and all along those lines. But like I said, the 4.5 years I was there, it was many decades ago, because it was in the early 80s. I thoroughly enjoyed my time. There was a big festival that I think is one of the longest running festivals still going on, called Summerfest, and all along those lines. And I keep saying that I'm going to go back one of these summers to actually attend a Summerfest, because it was on the lakefront, and it was a very wonderful festival. I think the one time that I did go, I got to see James Brown when he was living and everything along those lines. So it's definitely a nice city, at least it was during my time there in the early 80s. It looks like the U.S. lawmakers
One more thing about guns is you probably want to do a little bit of thinking about, don't let it dominate your every thought when you're out in public, but, do a little thinking about, if all hell broke loose wherever you were, which way you'd go, where the exits are.
Yeah.
And the mafia style seating in a restaurant where you sit with your back to a wall, a nice solid wall, and you've got an eye on the entrances and exits. So if some lunatic walks in, you can see it. Get a little couple seconds like advance notice.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's not just guns, because apparently a University of Southern Cal student who's only 19 has been arrested in the fatal stabbing of a burglary suspect, because apparently USC fraternity students stabbed a homeless man to death on Greek Road.
He saw a guy breaking into a car and stabbed the guy to death. And USC is in the middle of not a great part of Los Angeles. So USC students are, probably more frequently than, say, UCLA students, because UCLA is in a better part of town. They suffer more, participate in more violence than like the other colleges in town.
Well, maybe all these students need to hang out with the Dalai Lama, because apparently the U.S. lawmakers have met with the Dalai Lama in India's Dharamshala, and this apparently sparked anger from China. And Nancy Pelosi met with the Dalai Lama despite China's criticism, and it definitely looks like they were there, Nancy Pelosi and other U.S. lawmakers, and that didn't exactly make the Chinese feel good. And Pelosi slammed China for trying to quote unquote erase Tibetan culture and everything. So maybe that's what everybody's got to do, is go get a chance to go meet with the Dalai Lama and have a very peaceful moment with the Dalai Lama. So what are your thoughts on that? Because it looks like that's what Nancy Pelosi was trying to do. She was trying to have a moment of inner peace by going to meet with the Dalai Lama.
I don't know. He seems like a pretty chilled guy, but I don't have many thoughts on the Dalai Lama. But talking about LA, well, like LA is 400 square miles, really a lot larger than that, because it just goes on forever into outlying communities, which means that it's got a whole different structure and social structure than Manhattan, for instance, which is only about the same number of people on a workday crammed into 24 square miles. So, New York's a vertical city. Everybody's up against everybody else. It keeps you humble. LA is super duper, it's a horizontal city, super spread out, which means you have a bunch of distinct neighborhoods with different conditions. And like I said, USC is, the closer you get to downtown, LA's old downtown, the worse it gets. Skid Row is downtown. And yeah, if you go to USC, even though it's one of America's most expensive colleges, probably 80 grand a year now, you have to watch out because it's in the middle of a sucky neighborhood.
Sounds like a horrible neighborhood and everything. Apparently GOP lawmakers are getting on Biden's case because they are saying that the mass amnesty order was an election year ploy and that it was a case of political pandering. And apparently he's also facing some litigation from the ACLU and America First Legal. So it does look like, even though it seemed like a wonderful idea, this idea of giving the spouses a break, it does seem like it is getting some backlash as it is happening in a political season. So it does look like that.
Okay, but this is the season for pandering. If you're going to do executive orders that most Americans agree with, most Americans agree that DACAs, dreamers, people who were brought here as little kids and don't have citizenship but have only lived in America, since they were 18 months old, those people deserve to be able to continue to live and work in America and deserve a pathway to citizenship. So, if he wants to do stuff about that, if the order, his executive order offering protection for undocumented people married to citizens only applies to people who've been here for at least 10 years. So, you get, and I think the average person it applies to has been here for much longer, maybe something like 20 years. So you make it into America in 2003, say, and you meet somebody and you marry them, and you've never been a citizen, but you've been here, living and I assume working, for 20 years. And that Biden says, yeah, you should have some legal protections. I think most Americans would be okay with that.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised that the ACLU is upset at some of these things because they seem to be a fairly liberal organization. Hey, Rick, just out of curiosity, because another story that I saw came out of New York, and I can be bold on some things, but you really got to be bold. And it just like this young lady was fairly young and everything. But would you be one of those folks that would be kind of, and it comes down to the migrant stories as well, trying to be a hero? Because apparently there was a migrant accused of raping a 13-year-old girl in Queens Park, and she was caught with the help of some residents. And that's one of the things I'm seeing in the Daily Beast. They're even showing a picture of one of the young ladies that was helping to stop this attack and everything. So it looks like there were some folks that were willing to participate. And I do remember the old Kitty Genovese case where a lot of people just stood by and didn't do anything when somebody was being attacked. But it looks like in this case, they were like, nah, we ain't having this. We're going to actually jump in the middle and try to stop what is going on. So would you be bold enough to do that in your own life?
Probably, because I got trained to be less scared than I naturally am. All the way through grade school and high school, I was a little wussy, afraid boy. And then I started bouncing bars because it seemed like it would be fun and also a way to meet girls. And, if you bounce bars, your job is, when there's trouble, you have to run towards it. And I've been in enough things in bars where you run towards somebody and then somebody's drunk and you grab them and you fall down, or somebody hits you in the head but they're drunk and it doesn't hurt. Because they're drunk, you don't get hurt because their aim is bad and they're weak. So I've had enough, so that's trained me to be okay with running towards some potentially dangerous situations. So I might be dumb enough to jump in on something like that just because of but that's also the way to if somebody knows what they're like. I can't really, I'm a terrible fighter. If I ran at somebody who knew what they were doing, I'd end up getting stabbed or just knocked out.
Yeah, and apparently, sometimes people are also bold with animals as well, because apparently there was a story coming out of Alaska. And as far as I know, because I used to watch the show way back when, Northern Exposure, and moose are not exactly small animals, not even the baby ones. And apparently, a baby moose was trapped in an Alaska lake and saved from sure demise as its worried mom worried. So it looks like some folks that were of the human variety rescued the baby moose, and as the protective mother was watching, because apparently it was caught between a float plane and a dock in Homer, and it was saved and everything. So,
okay,
what are your thoughts?
Okay, to go back to, all right, there's a principle for dog fights and human fights. You don't break it up by walking into the middle of it, because then you just get attacked by, you get punched or bitten by both things. And my wife and I forget this principle, and we've been bitten by our own dogs when they tussle with each other. But if there's a fight, you can't go between the people. You come up behind one of the people, you grab them, and you throw them out of or dogs, and you throw them out of the way.
So, yeah, that makes sense. We're going to bring in Shaquille from Australia, see what's going on in his neck of the woods as well and everything. I do have to tell Shaquille just really quickly that I had a very interesting experience yesterday. I think I told you all that. That's why I was only on the show briefly and everything. But as part of, there have been several Juneteenth celebrations, and one was actually at the one of the federal offices, NIEHS and everything, which is definitely a science-backed organization. And they were having a lady that was doing a presentation on gene research and how it has some biases, both in terms of gender and race and a number of other things. But I know you go through this all the time. I don't know that Rick does, because he's in California and he used to work with Jimmy Kimmel, but you have worked with federal and international agencies and everything. I have not done that much, but I have done some presentations with, I've done 2 now with the State Department organizations and everything. And now I went out to this federal agency and everything, and you had to go through the gate. Actually, was catching an Uber out there. You had to provide your ID, and you also had to go through airport security, because they're a federal agency and everything. So I felt like I was almost like the president, because I was going through all this kind of security stuff and everything. And I'm going I'm just here as a community partner. I'm literally going to have a table that talks about what the Hayti Heritage Center, which is where I'm at right now, does in terms of cultural things. I don't even feel like I need to go through all of this protection stuff, but I get it. They're a federal agency, and they want to make sure that they are protected and all along those lines. And it's a very wonderful agency out in not that far from the airport, in the RTP area, what we call the RTP area, and they've got a nice lake. One of my co-presenters actually they have their own veterinarian on duty, because they've got a big lake, and I'm sure they got ducks and other animals out there, plus the animals that they're probably doing research on. So they have to have a veterinarian on duty and everything. But it was just quite fascinating being out there in that federal space and seeing all of this money that they were spending. I did get permission from some of them to air some of their seminars, because they do a variety of seminars on Pod TV at some point or another, because they do all kinds of research out there in the federal land, because they get these federal grants and get to do all kinds of federal research. But like I said, it's been a minute. I did go on a couple of, not so much. Like I've told you before, I went on that cruise, so I knew about the security on the cruise several years back. And of course, I've done a couple of other things, but I have not had the pleasure of doing nearly as much as you've done, because I know you've even done, Shaq, some things with some historical buildings. And one of the people that was out there with me was Stagville. And Stagville is a former plantation that is also like a cultural arts center and everything like that. So I met the young lady that actually is the site coordinator for that area and everything, because we're thinking about doing some joint things, because unfortunately they're kind of in the outskirts of Durham, so it's not always easy for people to get to them. So we're thinking about getting a bus together so that people can actually get to their venue, because it is hard
all right. So if you work for a big company, you're talking about security, but there's another thing that you have to go through every year, which is sensitivity and sexual harassment training. Once a year, you sit in a meeting, and it's a waste of time. It's kind of a waste of time, because it's every year. So it's not like you forget over the course of a year. And so but the one thing that's kind of a joy is if you work with a bunch of funny, obnoxious people, they get to say a bunch of horrible stuff in that meeting. Like the poor woman is running the meeting, and then some professional comedian says, well, can you say this? And then just says something freaking horrible. And the lady can't say that. It goes on for a half hour, and then you get pizza at the end.
Yeah, but to your point, and maybe Shaquille wants to jump in this as well, but one of the other companies that I work with, they used to have us, when we were physically in location, have to sign one of those documents, those anti-discrimination documents, like you were saying, almost yearly. And that was one of the complaints, was that whether it was that or the other more common training in terms of like grading the end of the year test and everything, a lot of it is repetitive, and it is overly repetitive, because if you signed it one year, why do you have to sign it again the next year? You've already signed it one year.
Well, because the company is covering, it's part, and it's that way with security procedures too. The company is covering its butt, so people can't sue them if something bad happens.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I'm just really glad, actually, that I don't have a normal job, like seriously, because I don't think I can handle it. I remember when I was working and some of this stuff first started coming out, and I was just like, "Are you kidding me?" And it's like something changed. I think that's probably why I'm so against a lot of these things, because for me, I know that something changed, right? Which was that prior to that my skin color or my different ethnicity or my different genetic makeup, whatever you want to say, to the majority of white Australians either didn't matter, or if it did, because Australians pull the piss out of each other all the time, if it did matter, it was like we would be joking around, and I would be giving as good as I was getting, and like it was fun, right? It's been very, very rare that I've had something, certainly in my adult life, been very rare that I've ever had anything that I would look at and go, that was like overtly racist, right? But then all of a sudden, it was like, oh, okay, like now lots of people are walking around on eggshells and they can't say certain things. And I've got family members that work for government departments that say, like, they're obviously the same skin color as me, or most of them are darker than me. That are doing sensitivity training on us, like on immigrant people, that are just like, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So I think this is part of the reason. I don't want to sort of go back to politics from yesterday, but I think this is part of the reason why a lot of these programs, in my view, aren't working. They're not having the desired effect, because instead of being able to look at real problems, like the issues that you bring up, Mark, and to a lesser degree that Toby brings up, with redlining and all these things, the way that the areas were built and effectively segregated even though they weren't, and private prisons and all this sort of stuff, right? Those are real issues in the United States that are facing your community in a way that I don't really think it's facing any other ethnic group, right? It's really a Black African American issue, and it needs to be addressed. But I think what my view is, if you look at similar types of attempts to fix these racial disparities or gender-based disparities or LGBTQ disparities in other countries that are peer groups to the United States, much of what the US is suggesting that they're going to do hasn't worked elsewhere. So to me, I think that there's becoming a real us and them. And I think there's a lot of people out there that just feel like, what am I supposed to do? I'm not a bad person. I didn't do all this stuff, right? I understand that somebody who looked like me might have done it like 200 years ago, but it wasn't me. And now I've got to watch what I'm doing. And some of the stuff that goes in these sensitivity training things. Well, when you walk down the hall, just remember to check your privilege. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, what is, like, seriously? If you haven't gone through what I will call the woke schools of today, right, what exactly are you supposed to do? So let's say you're an immigrant, right? Let's say you've just come to the United States and you've just been told that you need to check your privilege. What does that mean? Does it mean when Coca-Cola says in their employee handbook, what you need to do is be less white? And what I actually find, I was sort of trying to allude to this yesterday, Well, and a couple of days ago, when we were speaking after the show, and I said that after the BLM riots, what happened? Like, all the activists have gone away, and like, yes, there were some changes made, but the systemic issues are still there. So what happened? But during that time, all these white people saying, "Oh, well, but what you need to do is be less white." What you need to do is listen. Listen to those people. Like, that doesn't do anything. And the real shame of it, and what really kind of gets to me, is that these issues still exist today. In fact, they might even be worse today than what they were before. That's what I get upset about, not because I don't think the issues exist.
So I hear what you're saying. Hold on a second. But Shaquille, the flip side of that, and this is an interesting point, because, well, two things. One, I actually thought about you when the lady was doing her presentation, because she was making this observation. One, that it was an international study because the people were from all over. I think there was even a couple from Australia. I know there were a couple from Canada and everything. But they was talking about how, and one lady even asked her if they were doing research on the impact of environment and things like that when the people are in the womb and the placenta and all along those lines. But she was making this observation, and that's when I thought about you, because I do listen to our conversations and everything. Because she was saying,
I brought that up. I brought that up 10 years ago. And if you actually remember, a few years ago when we first met on here, I mentioned this to you. There was a documentary that I saw. Look, I can't remember if it was on Netflix or, like back before Netflix was streaming. We had a similar service, but they would send you the DVDs out through the post. I think it was back in those days. There was a documentary called, I believe, someone fact check it, look it up. I think it was called The Goats in Our Genes. And it was actually about Jewish Holocaust survivors who had moved to the United States. And it wasn't about them. It was actually about their children and their grandchildren. And what they were actually able to observe was that there were some different genetic expressions at a cellular level from the grandchildren. It actually skipped a generation. The children themselves were okay, but the grandchildren had it. And I thought that was really fascinating. Now, I can't remember what the conclusions were from that. But obviously, the experience of African Americans going back, into the time of slavery would have been, extraordinarily brutal, and it would have just because that's kind
of what she was bringing up and everything. Because she was mentioning this notion of the most affluent of the African American community might actually have some markers in terms of gene research that were even worse than the poorest of the European Americans and all along those lines. And like I said, I'll try to get a copy of her presentation because I'm paraphrasing what she said and everything. But one of my great fears, and it actually comes to the holiday, that today is the day I'm actually going to go see, ironically, a friend of mine who is closing his business today because of kind of urban growth. It's not that he doesn't glad, because he had a very successful African American business downtown, but urban growth and urban renewal and a lot of other things, including like parking and construction, have forced him to close one of his businesses. He's not closing all of them and everything. So I'll probably go see him in about an hour or all along those lines. But one of my fears about Juneteenth, it kind of happened to Kwanzaa as well, is that sometimes these are good holidays in the sense of being great holidays in terms of honoring the tradition and everything, but then they get caught up in our Western mindset of consumerism, because a lot of people today have no clue what Juneteenth is. They don't care what Juneteenth is. They're just glad that they got a day off because it definitely is.
But you know what? I think that's a really important point. I obviously don't really understand Kwanzaa and Juneteenth. I haven't been there for, but let me switch over to something else that I've never been to. And I thank you guys for having invited me next time I'm there. I've never been to a Thanksgiving, right? Love to go, never been to one because it's not a holiday that we celebrate. Right. But I'll just say this, if you can, not you personally, but if the majority of people can sit down and have a meal with their families to reflect on the Foundation of America and all these patriotic things that you want to reflect on that day, and you can do the same thing for Independence Day, then keep this about what it's supposed to be about, and it's specifically the experience of Black African American experiences in the United States. Leave the LGBTQ stuff aside. They've got a month, right? Leave all this other stuff aside. Let it be a day of reflection, not just of what your community has gone through, but also what the country has gone through, good, bad, and otherwise, as a result of this treatment. Because at the end of the day, some of your country was built on the back of slave labor. And, there were some very good white people that decided this is not fair, this is not okay, and we're going to fight against it. So there's some beauty there, and there should be some unison there. But unfortunately, a lot of people, and especially Fox News and stuff, that try to make it out to be something bad. Don't let them do that. It's a holiday that you guys have fought for. So do something and make sure it's about you.
Yeah, but not only that, but one of the, just really quick, I did see your hand, Rick. But not only that, but one of the things that we even talked about here in this cultural arts center that I'm part of and everything is the fact that sometimes those that were perceived as the enemy weren't always the enemy. Because one of the people that was one of the biggest, and part of it was that they wanted separate but equal, but they were also wanting to support a kind of development into the community because that was some of their workers and everything. So there is a reason, and I sometimes tease about it because he has the biggest stained glass here, even bigger than Jesus Christ himself and everything. But there's a reason that Mr. Duke is here. It's because when they approached Mr. Duke about helping to fund the building of this particular institution, which was a church, he gave the money because he wanted to find a way to appease the community and also build up some of the community as well. And he wasn't the only one. I know that you know that from some of your own research about some other folks that were in the kind of white slave owning mindset, or even the robber baron kind of mindset, but they were looking at it in the bigger picture. And we do talk about that even in some of our.
Sorry, Rick, we'll come to you. I just want to quickly say that's why I would never support what is often attributed to me. I don't believe in communism, and I think that the socialist push is too far on the left, but I would never advocate for laissez-faire capitalism. That's an absolute disaster, right? So we need to have a sensible mix, and most things in life require a balance. So we can argue about what the right tax rate should be, or how much the appropriate amount of funding for education or health or whatever. We can argue about that. But again, I don't think we should be divided over those issues. Rick, go for it.
Rick.
So you mentioned a thing, and speaking of capitalism, you mentioned that being your own boss, you avoid a lot of the misery involved with working for a corporation. But in America, and I guess the rest of the world right now, people have to have like crappy like side jobs just to make ends meet. But I gotta say, you've got a choice in crappy side jobs, but you want to pick one that's freaking fun. For instance, don't work in a restaurant as a waiter when you can work in a bar. It's less miserable because in a restaurant you have to, as a wait person, you have to kiss everybody's butt. In a bar, people are drunk, and there's less butt kissing. So
I have to disagree with you quite strongly, Rick, as somebody who's owned restaurants and owned pubs, and I still own a pub today. Dealing with drunk people when you are sober it's really not that fun. I promise you that. Unless you're drinking on the job, then it becomes more fun.
No, it's fun in that you can't like throw somebody out of a restaurant, but in a pub, if somebody's being a dick, you don't have to throw them out, but it's in the back of your head. Like, if I wanted to, I could just spin you around, put you in an arm bar and walk you out. And that's nice to have in the back of your head that you don't.
Well, yeah, I would somewhat disagree, but I do want to just come to something that you said there, which I think is actually a really important point, that a lot of people, especially young people today, are having that issue that they actually can't really find great work. And so they have little side gigs, right? And I think we've made a mistake over the last like 20 or 30 years, or maybe longer, maybe the last 50, 60 years, right? Where globalization, I think, is a good thing. I mean, I'm always going to promote international trade. I think that trade has to be on fair terms, but we'll leave that aside for a minute. But one of the issues that we've had as a result of globalization is we've had the mass export of good paying jobs from our relatively wealthier countries to countries where labor costs are cheaper. And sometimes, and I have brought something along these lines up in the past, I'm not blaming the unions for this. I'm not blaming them. But what I'm saying is that sometimes when the unions say we want higher wages and higher conditions, what they do is they actually incentivize those businesses to move overseas because those businesses become uncompetitive here. I'm not sure what the solution to that is. I don't like the idea of government subsidies being used to solve the problem. But if we're going to live in this globalized world, there's a couple of things that I think that we should make sure of. One, that goods that are manufactured at a lower price point than what local manufacturers can produce those goods must have at least similar standards to what we're required to have. It's not fair on me if I'm a t-shirt manufacturer. It's going to cost me $20 to make the t-shirt, but there's a factory that has child labor, that has the people working 16 hours a day and sleeping on the factory floor who's undercutting me. That's not fair, and we should do something about that. So that's the first thing that I would say. But the second thing is that we need to, in my view, we need to have more reliance on small businesses. It's the number one thing that I will say, because a small business owner, if you and I, Rick, have a great idea and decide that we're going to set up a company in California, I wouldn't want to set it up there, but let's just say that we did. It's highly unlikely that we're going to move that company to Bangladesh. We might move the company to Texas, but we're not going to move it internationally. So I think that's the thing. That's where there's been a breakdown. I think we really have to focus on making sure that we keep things reasonably fair in international trade, because otherwise you're going to have just the service jobs and then just the really high-paying corporate executive jobs, and everybody else is scrambling around for something, and then they don't know what to do. So they say, hey, look, I don't have enough to eat. I don't have enough to buy a house like my parents did. I'm still paying off my student loans. Now you're telling me I can't retire at the same age as my parents did. Like, what the hell? Someone's got to give. Fine, I'll go to socialism. Or I'll move.
All right. So you're right that, like, when you buy stuff, when you have stuff manufactured in China, or buy stuff from China, you don't really know what you're getting. I buy, like, pills and powders, and some of them come from China, and they say 98% pure, and that's not very pure. And I just roll the dice hoping that the 2% isn't going to mess me up. And so, yeah, that's thing one. Thing two is, I think automation is going to maybe help with some of the labor disparities.
But Rick, even with automation, because I actually ran into this twice now, maybe 3 times, but I sometimes, and I will acknowledge things that I have not done successfully in life. And one of the things that I wish that I had done more of, I know that probably you and Shaquille, or I know Shaquille are masters at this, but I wish that I spoke more than just regular English and everything. And I know I can learn because my dad learned late in life as well.
I can't speak
a foreign language and everything. Because one thing that has
I can't speak any other languages. I can't speak any other languages, and it crushes me because my family all can speak Hindi, and some of them can speak Urdu.
Well, it crushes me as well.
When they're all together, they do speak it, and I can't, and it sucks. Actually, not being able to speak it.
But and it even sucks when you order, because and it might have been the same gentleman, but I have, as y'all know, I sometimes eat out way too much, and depended on DoorDash, and more DoorDash than Grubhub. But I know that at least twice in the last 5 days, I've had the driver call me back, and the first thing out of his mouth is a bunch of Spanish, which I don't speak. And then he's like, "What do you speak?" So we run into this whole language thing. So I've actually lost some orders because of that. I did figure out a way to write it down so he could figure it out, and we did get the last order.
If I can, I just want to come to something that Rick said about China. So, look, China's a big country with a big population, and I know that they have a bit of a. I'm not going to try and be some great defender of China. I'm just going to point out that oftentimes when they get a bad reputation for, shortcuts being taken with manufacturing goods, or, in food products, all that sort of stuff, sometimes that's a little bit unfounded. Sometimes it's just because you've got one bad company, you've got a few bad people that have taken shortcuts, when that's not necessarily a reflection of the whole country. But more importantly, I just want to point out to Americans that, hey, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but a lot of your foods, a lot of your manufactured foods are banned in Europe, right? A lot of the foods that you get over in America, I can't even buy them here in Australia. Like recently, they've started having like these little kiosk things, like probably the last 10 or 15 years, where you can just buy like American candy and like American stuff. And there's warning labels all over it. Don't eat this, it's poison, it's really bad for you, right? So I think, I'm not trying to pick on America because you know how much I love your country, but again, this is sort of the stuff I've been saying. The big corporations, look what they've done. You've got the food supply where parents started saying, "Hey, yes, we would like to have healthier options in being fed to our kids for school lunches." And one of the things they asked for was fruit. Then what the food manufacturers did was they asked them, "Can you please define what fruit is?" Now the kids are getting like these little like candy things which have got like a certain amount of juice in them or something, and that's been classified as fruit. You're just taking the piss. And the problem is then in California, and I think it was Dr. Robert Lustig and a few others who started saying, look, sugar is a really, really big problem. It could be more addictive than cocaine.
Yeah.
We're giving it to kids at a really young age. This is a really, really big problem. Let's introduce a soda tax. And the soda industry or the sugar industry went and made a donation, and I'm not sure of the exact amount, but I seem to recall it was something along the lines of $10 million to the NAACP, who then immediately turned around, and just by pure coincidence, the NAACP starts saying that a sugar tax is racist. I mean,
All right. So,
the connection between the two is like nowhere near it. And this, again, is the problem. It's that people don't want to be racist. They don't want their kids to have bad food. And what has happened is two groups of people who have got the best intentions have had their best intentions and what they've tried to achieve completely obliterated by greedy corporations. And then we just put our hands up and say, well, what can we do about it?
Yeah,
no,
the corn
there's
lobby-
definitely
hold on. Let me say, like the
Mark.
corn lobby
Go ahead.
has made has made it so instead of sugar, because sugar is better than corn syrup. Corn syrup is the devil,
Right.
and the corn lobby has made it so that sugar's been replaced in a bunch of stuff. So,
But the point that I'm making still remains, whether it be high fructose corn syrup or other things. Like the point I'm making still exists. It's like for me, I was trying to do some research on this recently about baby formula, and I was like, I've kind of always been off the view. I don't live my life this way, but I've kind of always been off the view that the closer to the natural thing that food is like is probably going to be better for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why are we giving little toddlers baby formula, baby formula and stuff? And it's marketed to us that, oh, look, it's got omega-3 and it's got this and that. It's better for their brain. Like, really, is it? Because we didn't do that like 100 years ago.
No, we
What's
didn't do that
happening
100 years, and there's a lot of food industry manipulations, but I am of the opinion, I don't know how you're gonna, because I've even said that to some friends of mine locally, because I know that certain people on this network, I won't say who, are involved in smoking and do smoking cigarettes, and there's that lovely warning label and everything. And currently the Surgeon General has come out and says he wants to put a warning label on social media. And I'm trying to figure out where are you going to put the warning label? And two, how are you going to enforce it? Because I have yet to figure that out.
Well,
Just-
but that's the thing. Who's the warning label? Who's the warning label for? We all know I'm the one that smokes, right? Who's the
Well,
warning
you're not the
label
only
for?
one.
I know
You're not
I know
the
it's bad for me. I wear patches sometimes. I give it up for a bit. I take it back up again. It depends on how stressed I am. I really wish that I never took it up in the first place. I really did. I really, like, if I could go back, it's one thing I'd absolutely 100% say I would do differently is smoking. But we've seen the rates of smoking in the Western world amongst our youth go down dramatically, even before vapes became popular. So I'm not really sure what the warning label, what does that prove? And it's not socially acceptable anymore, is it? Like, it's not like you take a girl out on a date and she's going to sit back with that big, long, cigarette filter and light it up, and that's the sexiest thing you've ever seen. It's not like smoking is like the height of manliness now. Yeah. So, the marketing changed, the message has changed.
And I couldn't figure it out with social media either, because it's not going to stop people from doing everything they're going to do on social media. I do have a quick question, because we've only got a few minutes.
But Mark, maybe social media could give people more realistic things. Like, again, growing up as a teenager, what was the big push in the fashion industry? Let's stop having these girls become anorexic because they're looking at size 0. And size 2, models, right? It's just not realistic. It's not sustainable, and it's not healthy, right?
And the average man
the change back that we've seen now is that you're healthy at any size and you're beautiful at any size. No, you're not. Let's stop bullshitting each other. But the more important issue is for all those teenagers that use those filters. Now, okay, look, I get it. Sometimes it's funny. Hey, look, I'm a little bunny rabbit or some shit. Like, I get it. That's funny. But when you're using those filters, and when you hold your camera, like your front camera, it changes the dimensions of your face. So what you're seeing is not actually an accurate reflection of what a human face should look like. Right. And I think that we're actually creating a lot of people who look at social media. That's why I don't put very much on my social media when I'm traveling around the world in first class and going to all these beautiful resorts. There is some of that on there, but I don't put very much on there because I don't live a realistic life. Right. And I don't want people to go, oh, wow, look at how amazing that is. But that's what people see on social media, and it gives people this sense of failure. What are you going to do when you see the kid that you went to school with is cruising along on some beautiful holiday, and you're sitting there wondering, can you afford to go out with your friends on Friday night? Or is that going to leave you short? I mean, it's a problem, and it's just an unrealistic view of the world for a lot of people.
Well, it is a very
Hold
unrealistic view.
on. There's another, which is you can maybe throw on labeling that reminds people that what they're looking at might be bullshit. Might be there's a ton of videos of Biden freezing and glitching like his brain doesn't work. And in almost every instance, it's just deceptive editing. Like he looks like he's looking out into space, like his brain shut down. But then if you see the whole video, he's actually looking at something going on. And I'm sure that Democrats do that with clips of Trump. And, and it's 5 months till the election. And I'm sure the bullshit's just going to get even.
Then I think, Rick, I think we can agree there that if we're going to put warning labels on cigarette and social media, then we need to put the warning labels on legacy media as well, right? Everything on here is complete bullshit. Don't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just put a warning label on the forehead of every politician. Maybe we'd go a bit better in life.
Well, I mean, we can read so much. Like if you look at what's on a normal screen on a news channel, there's 17 pieces of information. Somebody from the 1980s would be like, they wouldn't be able to deal, but we can deal. So you could have a lower third that a crawl across the bottom of the screen that actually does some a little bit of fact checking real time. And
so you mean I should have a crawl right now that says Shaquille is single and looking for his lady love and everything along those lines? So I should have that crawl going across right now. I did have a quick question for you, Shaquille, because we can get ready to end, because you mentioned, and I think you mentioned it before, but I have forgotten it, everything, that you owned a pub and all along those lines. I've got two friends that are involved. I've got more than two, but a couple that are in that space, and they have made some tactical errors in my opinion. Like I was talking to the friend that is about to close his restaurant later today and everything. And one of the things he did is he stopped doing music. And as soon as he stopped doing music and depended strictly on coffee and pastries, I think that was kind of the beginning of the end. And there's another friend that's got a restaurant and everything in a performance space, and her pricing model was ridiculous, because at one point she wanted a $1,000 membership. So I think she got smart and realized that she needed to bring the prices down to a more realistic level. So as a owner of a business, what advice would you give to folks? Because when she first came out, she's like, everybody's going to pay $1,000 membership, and we were all like, no, we're not.
I got to say, and I know this is going to sound like a cop out, but I actually can't give great. I know, because I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce, representing small businesses, but I personally can't give great advice on small businesses, because, to be perfectly honest with you, my real talent is in trading the markets. Right. And I don't have to even have. I mean, you have a business because your taxes are better and stuff like that, but. For all the businesses I've been involved in, I've had a really good go at things. I'm going to tell you, I haven't really been that successful. And the pub that I owned, I bought the thing when I was, 22 or 23 or something. I bought it for a song because the building was supposed to get knocked down 3 months after I bought it. So the old owner just said, look, he made me a deal that was just amazing, and said, mate, you can have this until the owner of the building knocks it down. Well, it turned out that was 3 years later. So I got to spend my early 20s pissed. I was just blasted drunk all day, because you're quite popular when you own a pub in your early 20s. And on top of that, because I'd already made some money out of the markets. So life was pretty good, and I was completely irresponsible, did everything you could possibly do wrong, and I don't regret a minute of it, actually. It was a lot of fun. But it all ended in tears, and I had a heap of debt, and I had to go and work. So I got a job in selling solar panels, got myself out of debt, went back into finance. And now if I'm going to do anything, I do it with bigger sums of money, and I don't do it on my own. I always make sure that I've got a few other people there with me to shoulder the risk. So look, I don't know if you're just starting up a small business. I think it's tough, but just try and keep it simple is my advice. And the other thing I'll say is always look at the difference between wholesale prices and your retail prices, because oftentimes you've reduced your risk when you're in that kind of a business. Because the worst case scenario is you get stuck with stock that takes you longer to sell, as opposed to if you're in a service type business where you're paying your staff wages and you've got to hope that you get enough customers to keep you going. So, but that's not possible for everyone, because you might be, it might be that your skill set is in running those sorts of businesses. So, start slow. Don't put too much into it. Just, get yourself settled in, and then feel free to experiment with things. There isn't going to be a solution. You can't look at a business that existed in that location 10 years ago and think you can do the same thing, which means that if you're doing the same thing in 10 years from now that you're doing now, maybe you haven't kept up with the times. So just keep an eye on the markets, and always know and be a customer of your competitors. If you're in any kind of service business, every pub owner that was near my pub used to come and drink at my pub, and I used to go and drink at theirs. It helps to be friends with your competition.
But also don't have expectations of getting rich off a bar or a restaurant. It's a tough business. And you have to be, I assume when you had a pub, you were there maybe 12, 14 hours a day. Because if you're not, like, your employees will give away product.
So my employees were pretty good. I never used to work behind the bar unless it was extraordinarily busy. I used to work on this side of the bar encouraging people to drink. I used to be a pretty good pool player. So like, okay, come on, you and all your mates, if one of you beat me, I'll buy you all drinks. If you lose, and you've got to buy a round just for yourselves and just one for me. Okay, cool. So I used to do that. I had a state trophy and stuff. So I was a pretty good pool player. Proper pool players, I wouldn't put that bet on. Your normal amateur that walks in, I'll just keep it fun like that. That keeps the turnover high. But look, again, just remember, a lot of nightclubs and a lot of pubs that aren't corporate owned are owned by people where they don't even care about making money out of it. It's just something on the side, just kind of, it's a bit of fun for them and their mates to hang out.
It's a vanity project.
Hold on. So yeah, the deal is in LA, what you do is you're a freaking movie star. You get paid like $4 million a movie. And then you buy a little club on like Sunset Boulevard. It's just a place for, you don't care if it makes a profit or not, because
it's a vanity project.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And that's where I think a lot of people look at it because they don't realize that, especially if you're younger. We're way over time, but especially if you're younger, right? Because you look at it and you say, hey, like Planet Hollywood, right? We used to have that on George Street, Sydney. It's the biggest street right at the heart of the city. And it was this big like Terminator 2 like thing out the front. Like, it was amazing. It was cool as. How they made any money, I don't know. Well, they probably didn't. That was the thing. They probably didn't make any money out of it because, hey, don't forget as well, you get all those tax deductions and those tax write-offs and all that sort of stuff. So oftentimes what happens is people will say, look, bit of fun. I'll drop a couple of $1 million in that. Just to see what happens. We'll have some fun. We'll do our thing. And then other people, younger people, look at it and go, oh, well, that's the kind of place that I really want to run. So they try to save up enough money to have all of this flashy kind of stuff. The real reality is, most of the time, you're going to make more money selling at the lower end. When my pub used to be closed on a Tuesday, so I made Tuesdays the student night, which was open to everybody. And it was a clear out night. So whatever was left over from the weekend, come in on a Tuesday, clear out my fridges, right? I ended up having to order extra stock for Tuesdays because it became one of my most popular nights, because I was selling beers for like $3, $4 and stuff like that, right? Where everyone else was selling it for 10.
Right.
So, that's what you got to do. You look at your market, your clientele. Don't price yourself too high. Don't price yourself too low. But don't feel as though you're a failure if you're comparing yourself to another business, because you don't know exactly like what their financial situation was or is and what it is that they're trying to achieve.
Right, that's very true. And as we're getting ready to walk out the door and everything, the other thing that I have seen that a lot of people regret, because I've even seen it here in Durham, North Carolina and everything, is that I'll just give an example. I have a friend that bought his shoe company when the property was very cheap in downtown. I can tell you right now that if he wanted to buy that same property, it would not be what he got it for, because he got it for a song at the time that downtown was not developed and everything. So he got it at a time.
But that's also why that's a very important point. See, a lot of business owners are actually not trying to make money from the business itself. They want the business to pay off the property investment if they own the commercial property that they're on, right? So there's a lot of other things that go on with businesses, and as I said, you don't know their motivations. And the other thing is, if they're foreigners that have just recently moved, right, then it might be worth it to them to get into a business where they lose $100,000 a year
Right.
because they're able to get all their business visas and things like that. And then they can, that's a transition. And for them, it's like, hey, let's just do that. Because if you try to apply for a normal visa into the US, for example, you might be waiting 3 to 5 years to be processed. If you come in on a business visa, Mark, if you come in on a business visa, you'll be processed in less than 3 months generally. So again, you don't know what other people's motivations are. Similar thing for Australia, similar thing for New Zealand and England, and So again, just don't get yourself too much.
One more thing is my dad was a small businessman in Boulder, Colorado, in the '60s through the '80s into the '90s, and he watched his business district change. All these old traditional businesses being replaced with these new little ridiculous boutiques. And the deal was, there's no way most of these boutiques were making money, but Boulder was like one of America's cocaine capitals. And so a bunch of these boutiques were probably money laundering.
Yeah, the money laundering even goes on here as well. Because I was going to say, and I'll hopefully bring him on the show. He's been on some past shows. But Roger, at the time he bought the building, I would say he bought it for like a song. It might have been something like, it was definitely under 100,000. It might have even been 75,000. But I can tell you right now that property, if somebody was to buy it now, it's probably close to $1 million because of all the development that is going on in downtown and the surrounding things that are near. That's what when I say
if you're in the United States right now and you are looking at business ideas, my suggestion to you is look for those ones relatively low overheads.
Right.
Look for those ones where you should get relatively easy return clientele. Okay. So great example, laundromats. Yep. Laundromats do really well. In fact, I think I saw a report recently that said something like they had a 90% success rate or something like that. Okay. But there's other businesses, a lot of the businesses that you think are going to be good businesses are not. They have huge overheads, low profit margins. And one of those that you see them advertised all the time actually in the US for relatively cheap prices, are dry cleaners and garment cleaning places.
The only
whatever you do, stay the hell away from them, because oftentimes the chemicals that they use means that the property they're on needs to be remediated, or you've got some sort of environmental thing you need to do.
Right, that's what I'm going to bring up about laundromats, and even because I have some friends that are in that business, laundromats and dry cleaners. That when you build out of the business, because there are some that are doing well, like even White Star here in Durham is doing well. But if it ever closes down, getting that property remodeled, it will take forever. Because even when I was working in Northgate, there was one across the street. And I don't think that property has even been sold again, because it was that whole notion of what you're saying, Shaquille, of having to clean it out and all that stuff.
Yeah, but as I said, that doesn't apply with laundromats. Laundromats are nice and easy. Dry cleaners, not at all. Right. Sorry, Rick.
So you want to, Adam Carolla does this. He grew up in the Valley, and he looks for places that are gentrification adjacent, figuring that the gentrification will eventually, he buys stuff, he sets up a warehouse, he owns a bunch of, he does cars, so he does like industrial and like low-end stuff, and then waits for the gentrification to slop over onto his property, and then he unloads the property.
Yeah.
I've seen that even with some warehouses here.
Well, that's something that because I don't understand the United States as well as I understand Australia. So what was a big slum, 20 years ago was a place called Redfern, and it's really close to Sydney City. So I was saying, like, all that time when I first moved to Sydney when I was 11 from Western Australia, and I was like, Redfern's going to go through the roof. There's no way that a place as close to this is going to stay. And sure enough, now you'd be lucky if you could get a property there for less than $2 or $3 million. So when I saw Skid Row and I saw how close it was, and Compton, and saw how close it was to Beverly Hills and how close it was to really nice parts of California, I was like, surely these prices are going to go up dramatically over time. But the reason why I won't just rush out and go crazy and buy all the property in Compton is because I don't understand the Californian property market well enough. And that's the other thing that I would say to people. And I say that to people who ask me, how should I get started in trading? And I say to them, don't worry about the United States if you're asking me and you're in Australia. Don't worry about the United States, right? You're going to end up going to the US eventually because it's the biggest market, and there's more shares, there's more options, and all the rest of it. But for right now, don't worry about the US. Why do you want to be up in the middle of the night? Just trade the top 20 companies or the top 50 companies in the Australian market. These are companies that you see their logos every day. You see them on the news every day. Like, just stick to what you know, then go and do other things. It's a mistake I've made many times in my life where I have gotten, I start becoming a little bit self-deluded and go, oh, gee, Shaq, you're a bloody genius, mate. Wow, let's go and do this. And invariably, I go and do stuff that I know nothing about or I know a lot about, but it's in a completely different area to my area of expertise. And then I screw up.
Yeah, but
So,
you feel the flip side of that, because I know we're at the end and everything, the flip side of that, and you kind of alluded to it with the Compton example, because I can tell you here in Durham that there are very few what people would consider projects here now and everything, because those projects were literally bought out and converted. So like I said, I think McDougall Terrace, which is not that far from my offices here and everything, is one of the last ones, but Few Gardens is now the fancy apartments, and a number of the other ones are now fancy apartments and everything. So they kind of like were the projects, and then the people were moved out of the project, and then they brought in the fancy homes and all along those lines. So it's kind of that whole notion of what happens with gentrification, which is what you're talking about, is that the people that are moved out, and then the fancy folks, and the prices go up the roof, and then you got to figure out where those people that were there are going to go live, and that's an issue that we're dealing with right now, trying to figure out where those people are going to go. Because I can tell you,
but that's an issue that it goes all over the world, and that's where again I'm saying that when it comes to these social issues, right, we can't just allow. And I sort of said this a little bit more emotionally on Monday night to David M. Walker. I don't think it's right for the boomers who say to my generation, I'm either the youngest of the Gen Xers or the oldest of the millennials, depending on where you're going to put the line, to say to my generation, hey, we've really screwed up as far as all of these different programs. So we want you to wear the debt. You're going to have to pay it off for us. And just as a lasting present from us, we also want you to put your children through what we've just put you through. No. All right. We'll take care of the mess that you left us. But surely we shouldn't be expected to put Gen Z and what are they now, Alpha generation, all that. We shouldn't be putting them through a world that's going to look like what we are today. Surely we could do better, not do worse and not do the same, but look for something that's different. And that means that something's going to give. The only way that happens is if we have real conversations. People shouldn't be priced out of these areas. You're absolutely correct. So why aren't there programs that help them to own these properties? Right. Oftentimes these properties are subsidized by government anyway. Right, exactly. So why not subsidize the home ownership, just as an example? Right. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of things that can be done.
And there are some that do that, because some of the programs will have a percentage that are supposed to go to the people that are there, but sometimes the percentage is not going to be enough to get everybody there. And I get that, because I think in some of the programs they're like 10% or 50%, but they will be like a give and take. So they will have some that are set aside.
So why do it that? So why do it that way? If I'm a big property developer and you say to me, "Hey, Shaquille, go and do it," and I'm not a property developer, just an example, right? I'm just making shit up at the moment. You say to me, "Hey, listen, go and build this thing. It's going to be these huge, big, high-rise apartments everywhere. It's going to cost you $50 million, but we want you to subsidize the ownership for the people that are going to live there. But in return, we're going to give you accelerated tax depreciation against the asset." What am I going to do? I'm then going to look at this and go, okay, does that make sense? Does the accelerated tax depreciation make sense for the rest of my portfolio or for my investors' portfolio? Yes, it does. Okay, we've got a deal, right? And here's the thing. That meant the government didn't even have to reach in their own pockets to do it, right? So again, I'm not saying that's a solution, but I'm just saying there's got to be solutions that are better than what we've just done for the last 50 years, because we don't want to have these same problems 50 years from now.
Yeah, I'm not trying to have this conversation with you when I'm 112 and we said we should have been doing this back in the day and everything. Because I remember when I was turning 62, like, I'm 112.
I don't want if God blesses me with children, as I really hope He does. I don't want my children or grandchildren to say to me what I say to the boomers. Boomers, shut up! You had a dream run through life. Look how hard it is for us. I don't want that generation that comes after me to say, Shaquille, you Gen X millennials, shut up. You had a dream run through life, right?
Exactly.
Because we don't feel that way, right? As I'm sure the boomers didn't feel that way when they were growing up.
No, I agree with you. And on that note, we're going to get out of here. We'll have a little more conversation on tomorrow. And like I said, I'll actually be at the home office on that particular day and on Friday, even though I've got to be here for our Juneteenth celebration on Friday and a Polly Murray celebration on Thursday. But fortunately, both of those are in the evening. So I'll be able to be in my usual location. But we'll hopefully see our regular folks. I hope to see both Shaquille and Rick on tomorrow. And we'll see others as well. But this has been a fun conversation and look forward to more of them on tomorrow. So y'all take it easy.
Bye.